Let there be a lot more of that song on the intro after a win, as you might have noticed, relative to last week. This is Scary Alvarez Skull Session number two, the post Georgia Southern chat, and a little bit happier this week than I was after the Washington State game. Not shockingly. Uh, Hopefully, most of you, by the way, stepping aside for some shameless self promotion, caught the historical, legendary Scary Alvarez, Barry Alvarez, Cindy Alvarez podcast that dropped late last week. If you have not seen that, please take a moment. It's only about 22 minutes. Be the best 22 minutes of your day, unless you work in porn or something. But anyway, here to talk about the most recent Wisconsin game against Georgia Southern, a very game Southern Georgia Southern team coached by Clay Helton, most recently of USC, took over the Georgia Southern program in 2022. And as you remember last year, they in a game that some people were saying was a big win. They did beat Nebraska and Lincoln. Of course, that was not that big a win, but it's a program with a lot of talent, clearly on the rise. Used the portal really well to get the pieces in place that Helton thought it needed to run the offense, and that's a pretty strong offense. We'll get into why that offense didn't score more points this week. But anyway, let's talk about the game. I'm going to lead off with this. Many of you think I'm overly optimistic with this team and something that's gone back years, but I will start with something a little bit pessimistic. The first half performances of the Wisconsin Badgers this fall have been uh, relatively putrid. And if that trend is not reversed, and soon, starting with the game at Purdue, tough little night crap game, it's going to be a very difficult season to achieve the heights that the team wants to do. You simply can't do that against good teams. You're not going to be able to spot Iowa or Ohio State a two touchdown lead because although we're close, tied, or leading in some of the games we've had against lesser opponents like Buffalo or Georgia Southern, Washington State showed what can happen at halftime against a good team if you do not come to play. I do not know what is going on. I do not know why this is. And Fickle, who's known as a really good motivator, that's one of the things that came with the package when he was hired, seems genuinely perplexed at why the team is starting so slowly every game. And I have no, I mean, obviously, I have a tremendous amount of coaching experience myself. I can't figure it out either. You got to come ready to play immediately. The Buckeyes come into town late October. You lay a first half egg and you're down 21, and then it's curtains. So the good news is, because there usually is good news if you look hard enough, there's only one way to go, and it's up. So, I think this will be a genuine point of emphasis for the coaching staff and the kids going forward, and I think they can turn this around. I mean, there's nothing inherent that they're going to have a bad start every single game because they have started slowly in 3 games. So I look for them to get out early against Purdue, and we'll talk about my game prediction later. Anyway, I don't think I'm telling you anything you didn't know. It's gospel, of course, because I'm saying it, but there it is. Uh, Point two, the offense is working, uh, but we need to add the threat of downfield passing to make it get to the point where it achieves its potential. I don't think I'm not Moses on Mount Sinai with this here. I think a lot of you have noticed the same thing, but well, Mordecai, and I've been a big Mordecai defender. I know a lot of people are kind of coming after him. I think he's played a couple of real good games the last 2 games. I mean, he's managing the offense really well. I said the word managing now. I wasn't expecting to do that. Short to intermediate passing has been exquisite at times. Um, his legs, we talk about, his passing numbers were relatively modest as far as the yardage and touchdowns, and I get all that. But he made some plays with his feet that simply is a dimension Wisconsin has not had at that position for quite some time. Certainly did not have in 2022. And although Graham Mertz is having some success in Florida, which we always are happy to see, there was really no comparison with what Mordecai can do relative to Mertz on the ground. So that's a real positive. And I do think that Mordecai's had very quietly two really solid games and that have, again, teased the tantalizing upside that this offense could potentially have. Another thing I really liked was getting the tight ends involved. my Wisconsin Badger football grandson, Hayden Rucci. I do think that the Badgers, uh, many people thought that the tight end would be an afterthought, and it's showing pretty early that although there's a high amount of potential for the downfield passing game to continue to evolve and improve, tight end is still a big part of it. Not just the blocking part of it, but also the receiving part. I really like to see that. And I do like how the running game, especially through Braylon Allen, got on track in the second half against Georgia Southern. That was good to see, but again, a bit of a slow start. But back from the ledge a little bit about some of the things that happened in Pullman. That was a troubling game to see from the offensive line and running back perspective, and it was good to see that they turned that around. Um, the defense, this has been another thing that people have, even more so than the offense, have jumped on. I think it's pretty clear now that no matter what happens, no matter how the team develops, no matter who steps up, the defense is going to give up a lot of yards this season. It is just the way it is built. The guys that Fickle needs in some positions to do the things the Fickle defense needs or the Tressel defense needs to do just are not there this season. But if they get creative, if they're able to continue creating turnovers, being smart, getting to the quarterback, not giving them time to throw, they're going to be okay. I think another thing that the lack of playmakers has been a little bit overblown. I understand losing Herbig and Benton. I've been the first person to say this is a huge blow, but you're looking at an All Big Ten early season All Big Ten performance from Halter Waller. I believe he's second in the country in tackles right now. He is blowing plays up. A lot of times there are plays that unfortunately have gotten through the first level, but he has been everything that this coaching staff wanted and more. And I know I hinted at this, not just because he was on my podcast. I keep saying that, but I think anyone with eyes who saw him in camp knows that he was going to have a big season. So hats off. Jake Chaney, James Thompson Jr. There are plays coming. I know there were 6 sacks against a somewhat overmatched offensive line from Georgia Southern, but we're showing ways to get to the quarterback. And if that continues to happen, despite the fact that there are not a bevy of huge playmakers on this team, I think the Badger defense will be okay. It has to create turnovers and has to create big losses, and I think we'll be fine. But yes, the Wisconsin defense, like the offense, is a work in progress. Um, it would be great if someone stepped up, if someone we haven't mentioned yet could step up and Varner or someone who are hoping would come in and be a disruptor can make those plays and make that happen. Some disappointing play in the secondary, with the exception of Waller periodically. But remember, I mean, we have one of our starting corners, Hallman. This kid is super young. This guy does not have a lot of experience, and he has shown the ability, while he gives a big play up, to shake it off, come back, and get his head right back into the game. I think with some development, he'll continue to improve. And I do know the way that Fickle has recruited his style of cornerbacks, whether it's the freshmen this year who are redshirting or potentially redshirting, or the kids coming in next year like Agard. I think that secondary room is going to continue to improve. We just need some of the veterans outside of Hunter Waller keep stepping up or to step up and play the way they can. Um, Jake Renfro is reportedly going to be back soon on the offensive line at center. This is very interesting. Renfro obviously is a first team All AAC performer in his past who's had injury issues, missed the majority of the 2022 season, has not had the ability to play this year, based on a couple of injuries. This is something to watch. It's curious. Bortolini has had ups and downs, but he has generally been really solid. Had some snap issues early in the game against Georgia Southern, but got that smoothed out. That is a really talented kid who has grinded really hard to fill that position. So I'm wondering how that dynamic is going to work out. At worst, we have a really good backup center. Uh, but there's been some issues on the edge still, do we see a Hayden, pardon me, a Nolan Rucci get more reps, get into the game and see what he can do? Some of these other guys, I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. But I do think getting some bodies back on that offensive line can only help, and getting additional games acclimated into Luke Fickle's, Phil Longo's offensive system can only help. I think it's going to be not only necessary but vital for that offensive line to keep gelling as it starts to encounter some tougher defenses this year. I mean, don't get me wrong, Washington State has some quick guys and brought it, but the reality is the best of what this team is going to see as far as defensive opponents hasn't even come close to starting. It's those quick, twitchy defensive tackles and defensive ends from Ohio State are going to be a load. Iowa is what Iowa is. I mean, every week is going to be tricky. Minnesota's got a good team under Rossi, good defensive team. Their offense is like Madison Memorial. So we'll see how that gels. It's going to be really interesting. Um, as far as how the season's going to go, it could go a lot of ways. I feel like uh, the fan base generally, and I think I'm more specifically a little less bullish on the team's upside. But as I've said previously, and I continue to say this, everything this team wants to accomplish and wanted to accomplish before the season started is still absolutely in front of it, depending how the team gels and comes together. Okay. Big Ten West title. They are absolutely in the mix for a Big Ten West title, arguably one of the top two favorites. Iowa's offense is absolutely horrible. We can try and paper this over with Cade McNamara coming there. It's the same old thing. It's the same old. I know they put up 30 something points against an overmatched MAC opponent, but that team is the defense. The defense, if that defense, I've said this before, that defense with a decent, solid Big Ten offense would be a college football playoff contender. And I don't give props very often to Iowa, but that defense is just so solid, so good, and the offense is so terrible. We're going to get back to that in a minute. But getting back to my initial thesis, this team can still accomplish everything it wanted to do. It's just a question of how it comes together. So I'm still relatively bullish on this team. I do think that there's some pieces that we thought were there that are not, but there is so much that this team can accomplish depending how things come together. Just keep the faith. Let's see how it goes in West Lafayette. It's going to be a tricky game. I use the word trap game. I don't think it's a trap game. Everyone knows it's going to be a tough game, a night game in that crowd. But this is also a team that hasn't beaten us since George W. Bush was president. So hopefully that between the ears stuff factor favors the Badgers. Um, Last thing I want to talk about the Big Ten West. I alluded to it a few minutes ago. The Big Ten West is rightfully earning its perception and its reputation as a pretty bad Power Five division. Iowa, for things I just talked about, is a imperfect team. Northwestern, just absolutely terrible. I don't know where that program goes from here after Fitzgerald. It's a complete mess. Purdue has shown some upside uh, this season, certainly. They've had ups and downs. New coach, solid quarterback in Hudson Card. It's going to be a tricky game this week. We'll see how it goes. But I think they're a year or two away from showing what they can do. Minnesota, a little bit like a sort of poor man's version of Iowa, a good defense with Rossi, a good team like that, but its offense is brutal. Yeah, I really truly think there are high school offenses in Texas and Florida who are superior to Minnesota's. I mean that with all sincerity. Um, Illinois, hey, they're not as good as they were last year. Not shocking. Bielema has elevated that program by getting in the water and having the water rise, if you know what I mean. But I don't think they're great this year. But there's always going to be a tough out. Any game in Champaign is a tough game, and they've had a pretty tough schedule, but they're not great. And Nebraska, it's going to take time. I don't think their quarterback's any good. I think that they got the right guy in charge there now. But I do think Nebraska is not there. So some of these parts are this is a pretty brutal division, and it is absolutely there for the taking for Wisconsin if Wisconsin getting to play the way that they hope to the rest of the year. Thanks for tuning in. Scary Alvarez Skull Session. Let's get a win in West Lafayette. Let's keep that streak of misery going for the Purdue Boilermakers. And thanks for tuning in. Got a fun podcast coming up later this week with Evan Flood. I'm going to talk Con Kneppel recruiting and a whole bunch of other stuff. So peace out from the dawn.